Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome again as we are preparing for our last session of the afternoon. I'm Deborah Pyron, and just delighted to see this great crowd here. Robert Olen Butler will be signing books after the presentation today. That's going to take place in the signing tent. As you exit the sanctuary, it will be out to your left, but volunteers will direct you to that area. There will be no Q&A at the conclusion of the presentation. We have books for sale. Acapella Books is the sponsoring bookseller for this session, so if you have already purchased a book and decide that you want additional copies, or if this is an initial purchase, they will be happy to help you today. The Decatur Book Festival is a nonprofit, and it depends on sponsors and supporters and book lovers like yourself to make this happen each year with donations. And when you came in, you should have gotten one of these little bookmarks. If you didn't, they're available as you go out, but it's got a QR code on the back that you can simply use to scan that will take you directly to the DBF website for donations, or if you prefer, you can go online to the festival website, which is www.decaturbookfestival.com. Now, if you will take a moment, pull out that cell phone or any other device that happens to be or have a ringtone that could be disruptive in the next few minutes, turn it to silent or off. Now, please welcome to the stage Jill Evans, who is president of the Atlanta Writers Club, who will introduce this session.
Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're having a great time today at the festival. As she said, my name is Jill Evans, and I am the president of the Atlanta Writers Club. The AWC was founded in 1914. We are a thriving community in the Atlanta area and the wider region focused on the craft and business of writing, and we are very proud to be longtime sponsors of the Decatur Book Festival and of this talk today, where we are going to welcome Robert Olen Butler. Robert is the author of 17 novels and 6 collections of short fiction, including the Pulitzer Prize winner, A Good Scent from a Strange Mountain. He has also written various essays about creativity and his creative process. His latest novel, Late City, is a study of a man and his century, how the larger events of the world shaped him and what his relationships taught him. For me, this book is about distance and intimacy and resolve and compassion, and I know that you'll enjoy hearing him discuss today with Rosemary Magee. And Rosemary is a former Decatur Book Festival board member and director emerita of the Stuart A. Rose Manuscript, Archives, and Rare Book Library. Previously, she held positions at Emory University, from serving as a faculty member and an associate dean to vice president and secretary of the university. She is a writer of fiction and creative nonfiction. She has convened a wide array of creative conversations with artists, scientists, and scholars. Please welcome Rosemary Magee with Robert Olen Butler.
Such a pleasure to be with all of you today, and thanks so much to all the people who've made this festival happen. It's really an honor to be a part of it, and a special honor to have Robert Olen Butler among us. He's a writer that many of us have followed over the years, and it's just hard to believe that he's written as much as he has written. So impressive. I'm going to ask you a question about that in a little bit. But another accolade, in addition to what Jill has said, is that last year, Robert Olen Butler's entire literary archive, that's 126 archive boxes full. I know a fair amount about archives and how large that is, was acquired by a very, very well-known rare book and manuscript library at Yale, the Beinecke. And we know what a magnificent collection is there, and also how well-deserved your work is to be there, given its importance over a long period of time. And this particular book, to me, signals some of that sense of longevity as you, as a writer, contributing to our culture, because it also spans a long period of time. In fact, the protagonist is 115 years old. So,
as I feel I am at this point.
So that in itself tells you that the protagonist, Sam Cunningham, who is a journalist, has witnessed a lot of things over a long period of time. And so I have a couple of questions, foundational questions about the novel. The first one is that in addition to Sam, there's another recurring figure in this novel, and that's God. So tell us how God came into this novel.
Given the venue, that's probably the first question you should ask. Yes, God is a character. This has disturbed a book reviewer or two. But I urge you not, as you encounter this God, they will not seem probably what you would expect. And this book, in several respects, builds naturally, and it does it legitimately, but there are some surprises in the book that resonate into the kind of, after 115 years, what Sam has been piecing together, but yet has not fully understood. These things about the human condition that he needs to understand will come together in certain ways. And you know, God is a figure, and honestly, the book asks you indeed to accept that it's not just a figment of Sam's imagination. I don't want to say much more than that, other than just a first thought sitting in this place. You know, what this is about literary fiction here. And what is literary fiction about? And the guy that is the cornerstone of this building, the books most closely written about him, make all of those 4 books make the same point quite emphatically, that whenever he spoke, whenever he taught about the deepest meanings of the universe, the kingdom of heaven, what it's all about, the only way he spoke about it was to tell stories. He told parables. If you want to understand the deepest truths, that guy told you stories about seed sowers and vineyard workers, about weddings and banquets, you know, about mustard seeds and fishing nets. You want to know what it's all about, that's the way in. And that's what literary fiction, I mean, that is a trope for literary fiction. We create these objects of narrative that are of the senses, they are of the body. We inhabit the characters on those pages. We experience those things at the level of the mustard seed, you know, and at a banquet, even as we then go to work and sow some seed. Hello, First Baptist Church.
The book begins at a particularly auspicious moment or challenging moment, meaningful moment. That is, Sam is, I'm sure we can share this because it's central to the book. Sam is on his deathbed.
Sure.
And that is, in fact, why God becomes particularly present then. But it's also takes place in 2016. Right before...
The very particular moment, as a matter of fact.
Yes.
Yeah, the book takes place 10 minutes after that guy was elected, declared the President of the United States. And at that, with 10 minutes later, Sam begins to die. And the book takes place in real time. The next, of the 80,000 words in the book, probably 72,000 of them take place in a nanosecond. As God encourages Sam to tell me about your life. Sam, well, he was a newspaper man all of his life, and he says, give me the story, and that's how the book flows forward. And
we go through Sam's life from his early beginnings with his family and very destitute circumstances, or difficult circumstances, with his own father, and through his life and his time in World War I, and his own marriage and his son, and other things that transpire.
Right.
So it really covers a good bit of almost all of the 20th century.
Yeah, the so-called American century is well represented here, absolutely.
Right. So
and his war, of course, is World War I. Yeah, he is the last living. As he dies, he is the last living veteran of World War I.
So it starts, at this moment where he's dying, but it goes back to the beginning of his life, and it moves forward through the 20th century.
Yes.
And the panel just before us was speaking quite a bit about archives. You've had your own, papers put into an archive, but how much research did it require for you to go back through these major events of the 20th century?
Oh, extraordinary amount of research. Yeah. It's interesting, especially as I kind of suggested in that little preliminary thing I said, these books, the literary experience is a book of the body, of the senses, and the kind of research that you do is to not only understand the large events, but to understand the way in which the people in the books are experiencing those things through the senses. That is the way into us for all our things, our emotions, and then our thoughts come after that. And so I don't think that I could be writing. I could not have written Late City. And in fact, a number of the books I've been writing, I don't think they would have been as I could have done them as well if it weren't for the internet. I mean, we live in a remarkable age, and I'm very adept at getting around it. And I have, I'm 76, so I have a house full of books, and I would buy whole runs of, before the internet, whole runs of the New Yorker magazine, for instance. I have bound volumes out of a library sale of the New Yorker from the 20s through the 60s, and that kind of thing. I mean, I was constantly on the lookout for the kinds of places to go to understand the cut of the suit and the smell in the air and the Philip Morris stains on the forefinger, and whatever. Those things are essential, as essential as the larger movements of history and circumstance that pull these thinking, feeling bodies into the moment, and ultimately, it's the most important thing. I don't know. Maybe I'll make. If we don't get to this later, I'll say it then. So let's talk about yearning later, if you get a chance. If we don't, okay?
Okay. All right.
But in your own time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm fascinated by everything you have to say. One of them has to do with the world of journalism itself,
yes,
and how you became the character is a journalist, and the author obviously has become very invested in the world of journalism, including the title. So I want you to talk about the title and also how you come to know so much about journalism and why it's pivotal to this novel.
Right. Late City is the name of it's a Late City edition. Every major city newspaper in the great heyday of those big old newspapers had the morning editions and the afternoon editions and the Bulldog editions. The last edition of the day, and the big papers did one at about 2 in the morning, hit the streets. It was the last edition, the Late City was the last edition that had that, at 2 a.m., that previous day's dateline on it. And so, in a way, that's what this is. In fact, there's a little conceit in the book between God and Sam that he's giving him, the Late City edition of the Sam Cunningham Inquirer, and so that's how that started. Now, my connection to journalism, it's roundabout. I went as an undergraduate to Northwestern University in the Chicago area. I know the Chicago newspapers well, and I was always a tremendous lover of newspapers. I grew up in the St. Louis area. The St. Louis Post-Dispatch in that era was a fabulous newspaper, and I would spread that paper out every night and read the paper. But I went to school wanting to be an actor, and I was trained as an actor, and then I went to master's degree in playwriting because I started wanting to write, but then I got gobbled up in the pre-lottery day draft. So I was taken into the Army, and then they did a surprising thing. They sent me, from tests they did, they sent me to Vietnamese language school. I went for a year. I went to Washington, D.C. with a native speaker teaching me how to speak Vietnamese, and I picked it up well. They sent me to Vietnam, and from my first day in country, I spoke fluent Vietnamese. And so my favorite thing in the world, I spent a lot of time in Saigon, worked as interpreter for the American Foreign Service officer who was the advisor to the mayor of Saigon. My favorite thing in the world every night was to wander alone at 2 in the morning. My Late City edition every day was to wander the back alleys of Saigon where nobody ever seemed to sleep. And I'd crouch in the doorways with these people. And the Vietnamese are amongst the most warm and generous spirited people in the world. And they invited me into their homes and into their culture and into their lives. And so that, that profound kind of the grounding in newspapers, and then that experience when I got back out of the Army and went to New York and wanted to become a novelist. At that point, I knew I had books to write. My Pulitzer book was a book of short stories in the voices of Vietnamese expatriates living in southern Louisiana, where I lived for 15 years. But so I went to New York, tried to get a job in publishing. I didn't know what to do, and I was just, I had no journalism classes, but a guy at a company called Fairchild Publications, which published these remarkable hard news weekly newspapers. They were real newspapers, hard-nosed, hard news. They were specialized business areas, but they were as journalistic as the Wall Street Journal, if not more so. And he took a flyer on me, and I worked my way through. He sent me to Chicago again. I became the Chicago correspondent for electronic news. They brought me back to New York, gave me, in the middle of the energy crisis, gave me a desk and a blank check and said, invent a newspaper for us that will be written weekly in hard news for commercial, industrial, and institutional users of energy. All those companies and institutions were getting people whose jobs were to conserve, manage, and purchase energy. And so I created a newspaper for them. I did wide interviews among that group, and all of this, all of what this was doing, the link between the back alley people of Saigon and those business people in the energy field. I traveled over the country for that, and was how it made me a novelist was because what I did with them was to inhabit them. You know, with a person just being part of their culture in the back alleys, or delving into what their deepest professional needs are in a very difficult time. That energy crisis, as I can see some of you remember, was very difficult. But a literary writer, again, with the mandate that I described at the beginning, my job is to inhabit another soul, to inhabit another sensibility, and to render it on the page so that you can enter into that book and inhabit those people as well. And so, you know, that's how I got into journalism, and that's what journalism, you know, gave me, that eventually led me to this sanctuary.
And we're grateful for that. And,
Me too.
And also that journalism and novelist work come really to fruition in this book, Late City, because you inhabit Sam Cunningham, who is a journalist who's inhabiting these different moments in time, including several wars. One of which you observed firsthand, but that comes a little bit later in the story for Sam. But towards the beginning of the story, another quality of Sam is that, having grown up in the South and learning from the School of Hard Knocks, also known as his father, he learned how to shoot. So he was an expert sniper. And there's a section early in the book that we talked about a few minutes ago that I was wondering if you would read for us.
Sure.
And so you can hear directly from the novelist how this story unfolds.
Yeah, I always like it when people ask me that, because I mentioned I went to Northwestern to learn acting, and the ham always sizzles hotly in me when I get a chance to sit in front of a bunch of people. So, look, Sam, and there's a guy named Johnny Moon who's an American in the war, in the trenches, and Sam has been assigned as a sniper into the trenches here. They are both, this before America enters the war, just before, and they are they're with the French, and they have just been under attack, and there have been some woundings, and Johnny Moon is down the trenches away, and Sam goes down toward him. I navigate some bits of shrapnel. Ahead are thin, selective sounds. No moaning, no wailing, just a few strands of words emerging from an afterclap of surprising silence. Sounds like quiet conversation. I pass the stirring and rising of other men who are still whole, and then things get slick underfoot, and I try not to see why. Now I find Johnny on his knees, crouched beside a French soldier lying on the trench floor. Johnny slips one arm upward beneath the man's back to lift him, and angles the other beneath him so he can cup the man's head in his hand. What I know, what I see but do not let myself fully see, is the poilu's missing leg, sheared off in a gaping smear of blood and tissue and a white bone end. The whiteness, a shockingly clean-seeming thing, an inviolably essential thing in its color, but severed into a shard as jagged as shrapnel. Johnny brings his face close to the soldier's. The dying man is looking him intently in the eyes. Johnny holds the gaze. The man says, but softly, "Maman," and again, "Maman," and then, "Je suis tombé." Johnny says, just as softly, "Ça va, ça va." I don't follow. I am 17. I am as ignorant a boy as Lake Providence, Louisiana, and my papa would have me be. I recognize the French language, but we are North Louisianans. What is south of us is our state is another country, as foreign to me as this trench. The poilu says once more, maman. And Johnny replies, more softly still, though I hear it clearly, je t'aime, mon fils. The Johnny Moon then bends to the dying soldier and kisses him on the forehead. He pulls back just a little, and the poilu closes his eyes. I lift mine away. I do not understand a man kissing a man, not at all. And insofar as one might infer simply a thoughtful assessment from do not understand, it is a drastically inadequate phrase. It's the sharp snagging of my breath, the quick nauseated blooming in my chest and throat that make up this consideration. But my averted eyes see farther along the trench. Another man bends to another man, another wrecked man. I retreat to the darkness of my own dying, like opening my eyes in the night to stop a disturbing dream. But I quickly return to France. I have at least changed the scene. It's several hours later. I am lying in a shallow improvised trench, more trough than trench, just wide enough and deep enough to expose only head and hands and rifle at ground level. I'm part of an array of French sharpshooters in a 100-meter line flanking National Route 29. We're less than a kilometer outside Albert, waiting for the Huns' advance infantry, waiting for the further German push intended to take Albert's rail center that would cut off the French forces from the British and open the way to Paris. Highway 29 is lined with poplars, a dangle with catkins, and Johnny Moon is lying barely 2 arms' length away. We have just swabbed our rifle muzzles and gauged the wind and familiarized ourselves with our telescopic view of the highway and the flat fields before us. Now, finally, we are settled in. Johnny Moon and I have had very little chance to speak since the shelling of the trench. He's had his French comrades to attend to, and I have kept my distance. I think whatever I witnessed, this man and I are now the only 2 Americans in this field, and we are perhaps about to die together. And in truth, as I lie on the verge of real war, it feels as if Johnny Moon and I are the only 2 men in this field, in this country, in this whole wide world. I look over to him. He senses my glance and turns his face to me. Ready, he says. Yes, I say. It's been a tough day so far, he says. Yes. Our gaze holds for a moment, and I feel myself disconnecting from him. He suddenly seems stranger to me than the Huns down the road. I don't like the feeling. Sorry. I just had a reminder come up. Did I mention I love the internet? There are certain moments when you feel the technology really has you by the throat. And so I'm going to pack that. Has not been listening to my reading. He suddenly seems stranger to me than the Huns down the road. I don't like the feeling. Was he your friend, I ask? For a flicker of a moment, Johnny doesn't understand. He didn't realize I was witness to the kiss, but he figures it out now. I didn't know him, he says. My 17-year-old brain, trained killer though it be, is bewildered as hell. Johnny sees it. I just stare dumbly at him for the few intense moments while he works out exactly what's going on and figures out how to handle it. Then he says, "Do you understand French?" "No." He nods thoughtfully, refining his decision about how to approach this. He says, "A death blow like that can put a man in another place. He called me Mama, which is who he was seeing. He told me he fell down, told his mama. I said it was going to be all right. Johnny pauses, studies my reaction so far. My face probably hasn't changed much. He knows what's disturbing me. Johnny says, then he spoke to me again of his mother. I knew he was about to die, whoever this poor bastard of a Frenchman was. So I said to him, I love you, my son. I am still blank. Like his mama would, Johnny says, and he looks away. I think, and then you kissed him. And then I think of that other embrace going on down the trench. Johnny turns back to me. He says, look, young Louis, he didn't even have to take me for his mother. And it didn't have to be me that got to him first. It could have been most any other man in the trench who'd been spared for one more day from dying. And the dying man could know exactly who it was who'd taken him in his arms. It would all have gone the same way. And don't jump to conclusions about any one of us. This is about millions of men being forced to become somebody who has to dig a hole in the ground and then go down in it or jump out of it and die a ferocious, savaging death when you just want to be a farmer or a teacher or a sales clerk or a guy stoking coal in a tramp steamer. And there ain't nobody else in the world but you and the rest of the fellas in the same fix. And you have good reason to believe that's how it's going to be till you're dead. Your mama doesn't even exist anymore and never will, nor your papa, nor your girlfriend, nor your children, nor anybody else. We are all we have out here, just us men. So when it's your turn to die and you need some mothering, you need some tender something like a mother would give you, then by fucking damn, we give it to each other. Most of us know that and live by that. My young innocent boy of a lieutenant. And so will you, I bet, after you get a good taste of what's coming at you from down that road. And if today's your day to die, at least maybe you'll have an American mama who can hold you when you go. And Johnny Moon turns his face away from me and looks down Highway 29. I turn my own face, and I'm in the dark. God says, you back from the war already? Am I? Did you get a story down that trench? Not one for a family newspaper.
Thank you so much for reading that passage for us.
You know how much times I went over those words. I wrote them. I've read them 1,000 times. I've read them in public 30 times at least. But these tears are what literary fiction is about. It's creation and it's sharing. We inhabit the other, and through that we try to find our way, as the guy at the corner store of this building was trying to do, to get at what the human condition is really all about. And the way in is through the body and the tears and the feelings first.
And so your tears and the emotion in that story is meaningful to all of us. We're all brought into that emotional state. And I think that is one of the great wonders, as you say, of literary fiction, the novel form in particular, because it gives time to build towards full unfolding, and this novel in particular. And so that theme, or that scene, more than a theme, but that scene is played and replayed in Sam's head for many years to come. And if I were to give, as academics do, a subtitle to the novel, shall we say, one of them I thought about giving would be Fathers and Sons. Because Sam has a lot to deal with his own father, who's very harsh, and then he has his own son. And this scene, especially regarding his son, becomes, again, very present and very important in Sam's life.
Yeah, it does indeed. A lot of relationships in the book become that. But can I dig a little deeper than Fathers and Sons?
Sure, keep going.
Because with these objects we create, these novels, checking our time, we're good. It all goes back to Aristotle, that you have characters who have objectives and goals, and the narrative produces blockages and challenges to those goals. In the literary novel, and that's true of literary novels, and I teach creative writing at Florida State University, and
my alma mater, I might add.
Yeah, good. That's right. And those folks aspire to write literary novels, and so I say, listen, in the literary work, in entertainment writing, the goals can be, I want to capture the affection of that man or that woman, or I want to solve the mystery, or I want to figure out how to live with my father and or my son. But the literary work uses many of those things, but it goes another level deeper. And I use the word yearning rather than goals and objectives to suggest the deepest level of objective and goal for a character. And it seems to me that at that deepest level, that yearning level, I've got what Einstein called a unified field theory of yearning. I think at the deepest level, what all great literature is the character is yearning for a self, for an identity, for a place in the universe, as the guys were talking about in their own ways on the previous presentation here, for one example. And I think all great literature at its heart is about the great question, which is, who the hell am I? And the reason that's what the yearning is about is that's what life is about, And all the flashpoints in our culture, race and gender and sexual preference and, and politics and religion and all of those things. What are they if you step back and understand that we are all yearning to define who we are? Each of those things provides a prefabricated answer to that question. I'm black, I'm white, I'm gay, I'm male, I'm female, I'm bi, I'm Democrat, I'm a Republican, And when we grab one of those, and we all inevitably, some part of who maybe we are, and some part of our actual journey, and some part of always who we are, partly might include some of whatever that is. But the problems are always when you oversimplify it and make it a monolith in your life, and that's who you are, and then it stops being who you are. It takes you over. You become it. And as I say, the literary fiction then is really the nitty-gritty, in the moment, in the senses, in the complex, nuanced way, reflecting the essence of the human condition. That's what we are exploring page to page.
It's actually hard to, I have a million follow-up questions. We just have a few moments, but that's such a compelling statement and insight and worth really registering and paying attention to. And so is part of your own yearning then to work through these questions, these big questions that Sam is going through, and the Vietnamese people who are relocated to Louisiana are going through, and whatever you're working on right now. You told me you're working on a novel.
Yeah, I have to keep that. Yeah, I mean, and we certainly know that this has been a difficult time, and so. Oh, sure. This is I'm personally going through this, absolutely. And by the novel count with this one is actually 18, and I'm 30,000 words into 19, and that's my salvation every morning because, they were talking about the tiny town of Gumhead or whatever it was. I live in Capps, Florida, with a population of 1. In Jefferson County, which is massive, it goes all the way from the border of Georgia to the Gulf of Mexico, 700,000 square miles. The population of the entire county is 14,000, 24 people per square mile. And I'm in the population of 1, and it became the population of 1 3 days, as opposed to 2, 3 days before the COVID shut the country down. So Capps, Florida has been the epicenter of social distancing for a year and a half at age, and I'm coping with age 76, though I have written 3 books since I turned 70, and they arguably might be my 3 best books. So that is still driving me, but it's been me and existential dread crawling to bed together every night.
Well, we are fortunate that it yields.
I crawled out for this. This is a big help, I gotta tell you.
That works itself out in literary fiction and the things that you have to say, the stories you have to share, and your presence among us. So I know everybody will join me in thanking you so much for being with us today. It's been a great honor.
Thank you. Thank you.
That was great.